He gripped the mop, invisible to the people who once feared him. Then she appeared. Loretta. She stopped, looked at him, and then dropped her coffee. Dark liquid spread across the freshly cleaned floor. Jonathan's hands trembled. Now, he was in her place. But what happened next will shock even those who think they've seen it all. Let's start from the beginning. The polished glass walls of Winford Solutions reflected the sterile glow of overhead lights, a perfect facade of power and prestige. Inside the conference room, a sea of tailored suits and polished shoes filled the space, each employee careful with their words, their expressions, except for Jonathan Wells. He didn't need caution. He owned the room. Tall, sharp-jawed, his tailored navy suit pristine, Jonathan radiated control. He was a man who didn't just demand authority, he exuded it. His smirk was sharp, practiced, the kind that made people doubt themselves before they even spoke. In his hand, he held a nearly empty coffee cup, the remnants of his morning indulgence swirling lazily at the bottom. His eyes flicked to Loretta Williams. "Loretta!" His voice sliced through the room. Conversations died. Employees stiffened, instinctively stepping aside as the janitor approached. 50 years old, slender, hair neatly tied back in gray curls. She had worked here longer than most in this room, seen employees rise and fall, companies expand and collapse. But no matter how many promotions and restructures took place, she remained invisible. Loretta approached without hesitation, her posture straight, movement steady. Jonathan barely looked at her as he tilted the cup. A single drop of coffee fell, dark against the pristine white marble floor. Plop. A pause. A breath. Then, he chuckled. Oops. Silence. Not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that suffocates. The kind that makes people stare at the ground, hoping they won't be next. "Clean that up," Jonathan ordered. Loud, sharp, the tone reserved for subordinates. Loretta's fingers curled slightly, but she moved without complaint. She knelt, her cloth sweeping over the tiny stain as the room watched. Then Jonathan spoke again, lazily, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Imagine," he drawled, leaning back in his chair, arms folding across his chest. "A lifetime of effort, just to end up scrubbing floors." Laughter followed, hesitant at first, then growing. Jonathan smirked, satisfied. He had barely registered Loretta standing back up, hadn't noticed the way her eyes, dark and steady, locked onto his. Not with shame, not with anger, with something deeper, something unspoken. Jonathan didn't care. He turned away, already forgetting her. But karma wasn't so forgetful. The morning air inside Winford Solutions was different. Jonathan Wells walked in with his usual self-assured stride, his polished shoes tapping against the pristine marble floor. Every day, the office greeted him the same way. Silence. Employees hushed their conversations the second he appeared. Eyes dropped, backs straightened. Not today. The whispers didn't die down. If anything, they grew. Jonathan's sharp blue eyes flicked across the open floor, catching the briefest glances before heads turned away. Cowards. They always had something to say when they thought he wasn't looking. His assistant, Rachel, appeared at his side, moving quicker than usual. Too quick. "Sir, there's a problem." Jonathan didn't slow down. He barely looked at her. "Handle it." Rachel hesitated. Her usual crisp, professional tone wavered. "It's you. It's about you." That made him stop. Jonathan turned, his smirk still lingering, but his patience wearing thin. Rachel never fumbled her words. She was one of the few people he actually respected in this office. She swallowed and handed him a printed email. Official letterhead. Jonathan's eyes scanned the words, his expression hardening with every line. Subject: Workplace abuse at Winford Solutions. Recipient: Ethics Committee, Corporate HQ. A formal complaint. Detailed, precise, outlining his behavior. The footage was attached. The moment replayed in his mind before he could stop it. The conference room, the coffee, the laughter. Loretta. Jonathan's grip on the paper tightened. Who sent this? Rachel exhaled sharply. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere. The recording had spread. Fast. Not just within the office, beyond it. Clients had seen it. Investors. Social media had picked it up. Jonathan forced himself to keep his face blank, but a deep unease was settling in his chest. This wasn't just office gossip anymore. This was damage. He shoved the paper back at Rachel. Fix this. She didn't move, didn't panic, didn't apologize or rush to obey. Instead, she met his gaze and said, It's too late. For the first time in his career, Jonathan felt something cold coil around his spine. Because Rachel wasn't just giving him bad news. She was giving him a verdict. The board had already scheduled a meeting. Jonathan's future was on trial, and he wasn't winning. The fall was brutal. The board of directors did not waste time. Bad PR meant bad business, and Jonathan Wells had become a liability overnight. They didn't sugarcoat it. Indefinite suspension pending investigation. He was locked out of his own office, escorted to the elevators by security like a stranger, as if the years he spent building his empire had never happened. His name burned across headlines. Corporate news dissected his fall from grace. Social media tore him apart, and former allies distanced themselves with chilling efficiency. Within days, he became untouchable. No more calls, no more emails, no more invitations. He reached out. At first, to colleagues, then to acquaintances, then to anyone. But the responses were the same. Silence. Then came the bills, the penthouse, the luxury car leases, the lifestyle that once defined him. Now, it was crushing him. Creditors knocked. Legal letters arrived. And then, the final blow. Corporate attorneys flagged irregularities in his expense accounts. The company froze his assets while they investigated possible misuse of funds. Jonathan Wells, the man who once ruled this building, had nothing left. 3 months later, the office smelled the same: disinfectant, coffee, success. But Jonathan wasn't walking through the doors as a director anymore. He wasn't walking in at all. He was mopping the floors. The weight of it sat heavy in his chest. The corporate penalties had drained him. His options were limited, and the only job he could get was here, as a janitor. His hands clenched the mop. His jaw tightened. The same people who once feared him, obeyed him, catered to him, now barely noticed him. Except for one person: Loretta. She stood at the end of the hall, watching him. No smirk, no gloating, just knowing. She walked past him, pausing just long enough for the moment to sink in. Then, she dropped her coffee. A single dark stain spread across the freshly cleaned floor. Jonathan's hands trembled around the mop handle. He looked up at her, but she didn't say a word. She just walked away. And for the first time, Jonathan Wells understood. The weeks dragged on, each day a slow erosion of what Jonathan Wells once was. At first, there was rage, a deep, burning indignation at the world, at the company, at Loretta, at everyone who had let this happen. He convinced himself it was temporary, that he would claw his way back. But no one cared. No one looked at him with fear anymore. No one listened. Then came pride, stubborn and unyielding. He did the bare minimum, refusing to acknowledge the whispers behind his back, the looks from employees who still recognized his face, but no longer his status. Until even that crumbled. And what replaced it was something he had never truly known: humility. Jonathan didn't remember the exact moment it settled in, the moment when he stopped resenting and started accepting. Maybe it was when he caught his own reflection in the glass doors late one night, mop in hand, shoulders slumped. Maybe it was when he realized that no one owed him redemption. Or maybe it was right now. The office was nearly empty, the hushed quiet of late evening settling over the halls. The executives had gone home. The high-stakes deals and backroom politics paused until morning. The only sounds were the faint hum of the vending machine and the slow, deliberate movement of Jonathan wiping down the break-room tables. He didn't notice Loretta until she spoke. "It's not easy, is it?" Her voice was soft, but there was no pity in it, just understanding. Jonathan exhaled. No. For the first time in his life, the word carried no arrogance, no defensiveness, just truth. Loretta studied him, then gave a small nod. "You don't have to stay this way. But you do have to learn." Jonathan met her gaze, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not as the invisible worker in the background, not as someone beneath him, not as a symbol of his downfall. Just a person who understood things he never had. And in her eyes, he saw not victory, not satisfaction, wisdom, a hard-earned lesson, one he would never forget.